Jesus said, "All sin and blasphemy shall be forgiven human beings, except the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. He who blasphemes against the Holy Spirit has forgiveness never, not in this world, nor in the life to come." In Mark's account of these words in the New Testament, he talks about this as an eternal sin, a sin that goes on and on forever. Those who are Christians, who read the Bible and take it seriously, often stumble at this text. How can this be? What is this sin? Have I committed this sin of the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit? Those who are not Christians and who are critical of Christianity or critical of Jesus might say, well, how is that consistent with Jesus talking about a God of love and a God of compassion? That there is a sin that no matter what we do, we can never find forgiveness of it. So I want to talk for just a couple of minutes about this sin against the Holy Spirit and try to discover what it is and to see how it fits together with the very important central Christian belief that God is love. And so how could God be love, and how could God be merciful and forgiving, and yet there be a sin that there can be no forgiveness from? So in order to get started thinking about it, I think first of all we should take a careful look at the text itself. What happened here? Well, in Matthew's account, Jesus had just healed someone who was blind and mute and demon-possessed. And so the man is cured in front of them. And the Pharisees, a religious group among the Jews, the Pharisees, who prided themselves on their strict observance of the law of Moses, they accused Jesus of doing the things that he did, including the miracles that he had just performed, by the power of Beelzebul, the prince of the demons. Now, this appears to be, and you can read about it in various biblical commentaries, but this appears to be Beelzebul, or Beelzebub, was a name of a foreign god, the god of flies, that was taken into Jewish terminology and language as an insult. There was a slight variation in the word when it was brought over into their language that made it mean the prince of the demons. In other words, the worst of the worst, the darkest of the dark, the most grotesque of the most grotesque of beings. And so it wasn't just a way of saying, we think that what you're doing is not of God, nor is it even a way of saying, we think that what you're doing is of the devil. It's a way of saying, what you're doing is the nastiest stuff. The forces behind what you are doing are the nastiest and the dirtiest of them all. And so Jesus said to them, you can speak against me all you want, and you can find forgiveness for that. But if you speak against the Holy Spirit, there is no forgiveness from that. Now, I think it's important to notice a couple of things here. First of all, we should be attentive to what is meant by Holy Spirit. In the New Testament and in the Old Testament, the references to the Spirit of God or to the Holy Spirit are normally, most always, they are references to God's dynamic, active presence in the world. Now, there are other texts where there's other shades and layers of meaning to that expression, but most of the time, the references to the Holy Spirit are about the work of God. So in this particular case, Jesus is doing things, the gospel writers are saying, Jesus is doing miracles by the power of God. So you could say the Holy Spirit was at work. The dynamic, active presence of God was there. So Jesus says, if you speak against the Holy Spirit or you blaspheme, and the word blaspheme has to do with speaking profanely against someone. So if you speak profanely against the Holy Spirit, there is no forgiveness from that. If you take the work of God and attribute it to demonic forces, there's never forgiveness from that. Now, what exactly does that mean? Does it mean, and St. Thomas Aquinas, for example, gave 3 different interpretations of this that have been present in the history of the Church. One of those interpretations of what it means to blaspheme against the Holy Spirit is the one that I think is least likely in this case. That is the one that says to blaspheme the Holy Spirit is to simply say words with one's mouth or with a pen or whatever against the Holy Spirit. It has nothing to do with the intention behind it. It's automatic. It's like, if you do this, then this is the result. If you utter these words, then this is the effect of it. That doesn't seem reasonable to me. For instance, if I gave you a script of terrible words against the Holy Spirit in a language that you don't know, and you read those words, you would not be guilty of blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. You wouldn't be guilty of it because you had no idea what you were doing. You didn't understand what you were doing. However, if you spoke those words knowing fully their implications or their meanings, that would be a different scenario. So really, the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit is not so much about the words that are uttered as it is about the state of one's heart, that I reject the work of the Holy Spirit. I reject the presence of God's active power in the world. I turn away from that, and in fact, I attribute it to the devil, or I speak profanely against what is in fact the work of God, and I consciously and deliberately reject it as something else. That brings us to the second and to the third interpretations that Aquinas offers, and I won't distinguish between them here for sake of time, but they are very closely related to each other, that the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit has more to do with one's final decision to reject the work of the Spirit. It's important to notice in Matthew 12 and in the other texts, Jesus never says that the Pharisees in these cases are guilty of this sin against the Holy Spirit. He simply warns them of it. He says that all manner of sin and blasphemy will be forgiven except the blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. There's never forgiveness of that. And so what does he mean? He means by this that if you reject the work of the Holy Spirit, if God is at work in the world and God is at work in your environment or within yourself, and you say that is the work of the devil, that is not of God, then there is no forgiveness from that. Why is there no forgiveness? Because there's no other source of forgiveness, no other source of grace, no other source of the power that we need for eternal happiness. And so if I say no to the grace of God, obstinately, permanently, maliciously, and without turning away from it, not ignorantly, I'm saying I reject the work of God. I reject the work of the Holy Spirit. Then I can't find forgiveness from that. This doctrine of blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, this idea that blasphemy against the Holy Spirit is never forgiven, is really an affirmation of human freedom. We are genuinely free. God will not make us be saved. God will not make us accept His forgiveness. God will not force us to accept something as the work of the Holy Spirit. We have to freely embrace it and choose to accept that it is true. Open our hearts to receive it. If we don't open our hearts to receive it, if we resist it and turn away from it, we are choosing a darkness from which there is no other remedy. How do I know if I've committed this sin against the Holy Spirit? I don't know that I have committed it, but I would know if I have not committed it by the fact that I want God's salvation and His forgiveness. So if I ever come to a moment in my life where I want God's forgiveness and His mercy and His salvation, if I ever come to that moment, I can reach out to God and know that His mercy is real and is there, as long as I want to receive it. If I don't want it, then I don't know if I have committed this sin or not. But if I do want God's grace and salvation, I know I have not committed this sin because God's Spirit is at work in me and I am saying yes to it.